Hello, everybody. How are you doing out there? Hope all is well wherever you are tuning in from. We're suspecting probably from the United States, just based on the topic of this live stream. My name is Dane Stewart. If you haven't tuned in before, I'm one of the content developers on the team with Moving to Canada. And I am joined today by a wonderful guest, Jenny Perez, a regulated Canadian immigration consultant and founder of Perez Mackenzie Immigration, a consultancy that's based on the West Coast in Vancouver and also Whistler. And so Jenny is joining me from the other coast. I'm over in Atlantic Canada, and Halifax, basically as far away as I can possibly be from you. But how are you doing today, Jenny? How are things out on the West Coast?
Yeah, things are well over here. It's always beautiful in Vancouver. We are keeping very busy, given the circumstances. And we are experiencing an uptick on COVID cases, and that is challenging some, but there are also many other sectors that are doing really well, and it's like the tech sector, and I'm sure that we're going to talk more about it, and there are a lot of people here that are looking forward to hear about it.
Yeah. I know BC is known for having this sort of up-and-coming tech sector, and they've even got like some immigration programs that specifically target that sector, and we will, I promise you, viewer out there, we will get to those in a little bit. Yeah, it's interesting, the COVID situation in Canada. It's very regional. Toronto and Montreal are going through a steep second wave at the moment, and I know BC's seeing a little rise. Meanwhile, out east in Nova Scotia, we have essentially no cases, which is very lucky. So hey guys, if you're looking for a COVID-free place in Canada to immigrate, Nova Scotia's your destination province. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We are, of course, covering the subject on how to immigrate to Canada from the United States. If you do have questions, we've got the comments up and running, so feel free to drop your questions into the comments as we go through. We also collected some comments from our discussion thread in the Facebook event in advance, so we'll be addressing some of our viewer questions as we go through the live stream. But let's talk a little bit about who this is for, because I know if you are tuning in from the United States, there are kind of two classes of people that we've designed this for. First, of course, is U.S. citizens. So if you were born and raised in the United States, you're looking to immigrate, this is for you. But it's also for people who are residing in the U.S., maybe on some sort of temporary or permanent residence status. So we know a lot of H-1B workers, temporary workers in recent years have been, making the jump for whatever reason. We won't go into that, from the United States to Canada. So we're also going to be going over some immigration options for U.S. residents in addition to citizens. And just before we jump into it, I'm going to show off one of the pages on the Moving to Canada website. We've got a section here on how to move to Canada from the United States. We've got a ton of resources here. So resources on, how to immigrate as a citizen, how foreign workers from the U.S. can move to Canada, how to retire from the U.S. to Canada. So if you are looking for a collection of these resources after the live stream, you can find them all on the Moving to Canada website. It's right under the immigration header. You go to moving from, and we've got a bunch of different countries listed there. But enough of that. Let's talk about the order of operations for today's live stream. So a bit of a table of contents for you guys. What are we covering? We're going to start off by talking about a myth that we hear. And I don't know, Jenny, do you hear this coming into
your... Yes, a lot, especially...
Yeah, it's easy to immigrate to Canada from the United States. We're going to kind of unpack that myth for our audience members. Then we're going to do a quick immigration lesson on the difference between temporary status and permanent status, an important distinction if you're planning your immigration process. And then we're going to target some immigration streams for workers. So a couple of big streams in Canada: express entry, provincial nominee programs, and work permits. I won't go into detail now. We will be covering them in detail later. And after that, we're going to do a quick bit of coverage on immigration for students. So coming to Canada as an international student and maybe using that as a pathway to staying here permanently. And also immigration for families. So spousal sponsorship, sponsoring a child, sponsoring a parent, that sort of thing. So that about covers it for the table of contents. So I think we're ready to jump into it. And we're going on to our first topic, which is this myth. So the myth that we hear at Moving to Canada all the time, and Jenny, you mentioned you hear it at PMI, this myth that it is easy to immigrate to Canada from the United States. We know that Canada and the US are very close countries. They're really important trading partners. They have this big border, and they, in a normal year, in a non-COVID year, let tons of people just sort of go across that border quite freely for tourism purposes. But how true, Jenny, is this myth that it's easy to immigrate to Canada from the US?
It's definitely not as easy as it used to be. The process has evolved a lot, and there is an additional complexity that started especially in 2015 with the introduction of express entry. So I talk with a lot of Americans that tell me, oh, before I didn't even need a passport to come to Canada, now all this and that. And yeah, I would say that it's still feasible for the right candidate. And we're going to talk more about it.
For sure. And Canada, like, it makes sense that it's a bit complicated to immigrate permanently because you get access to all, like, we have a universal healthcare system. We have all these social services. You know, like, in order for the country to support people coming into it, they have to make sure that there's going to be some sort of economic gain. So that's an important thing to consider. But I put up a couple of facts and figures here, things that I think might be useful for U.S. Citizens and residents to understand. In 2019, we had nearly 11,000 U.S. citizens who gained permanent resident status in Canada. So about 11,000. Now, bear in mind, Canada aims to accept about 340,000 immigrants per year. Right now, that's probably going to go up over the next couple of years. So 10,000 of that 340,000 were U.S. citizens. And the other interesting data point that I pulled, this is related just to express entry, which is one of the main systems for economic immigration. We're going to get into that in more detail in a moment, is that 10,000 of the invitations through express entry in 2019 were issued to U.S. residents. But that includes both citizens and temporary workers, while only 1,500 of the invitations were issued to U.S. citizens. So we actually only see a tiny sliver of U.S. citizens leveraging the express entry immigration system, and that's why we're going to cover it in detail for you today, because if you are a good candidate, it can be a really strong immigration option. So let's move on to this term that we keep throwing around today, temporary residence versus permanent residence. So Jenny, can you tell our viewers, we're going to unpack temporary versus permanent status. So temporary resident status, what does that mean in Canada? And can you give a couple examples of temporary residence?
Temporary residence is when you come to Canada as a visitor or as a student or as a worker. And this is when you transition, you become the equivalent to a green card holder in the US. And you basically are entitled to everything that a Canadian citizen is entitled to, except for the passport and the right to vote. And there are also some minor details, but yeah, you have access to pretty much everything with Canadian residency. Examples of students are, a lot of people come here as students first, in order to train workers. A lot of people from the US have come over the years using NAFTA and now called CUSMA, and I'm sure we're going to talk more about that too.
We are,
right?
Yeah, and students, I mean, Canada's, if you're in the U.S., the U.S. has some great colleges and universities, but Canada has some schools that will honestly rival the schools in the States. We've got some pretty world-class educational institutions here. And if you're planning long term, coming here as a student can be a great stepping stone. So permanent resident status. Just to give a bit of the flip side here, you mentioned permanent residents. They don't have the right to vote. Is that correct?
That's right. That it's not until you become a citizen that you can vote.
But in order to become a citizen, does having your permanent status, is that helpful?
Yes, the Citizenship Act has changed over the years, but at the present time, you need to live in Canada 3 years in the last 5 years in order to be eligible for citizenship, and at least 2 years of those 3 years must be as a Canadian resident.
Yeah, that's great. And as you said, that sometimes changes depending on the government. The previous government made you have 4 out of 6 years. Now it's 3 out of 5 years.
Exactly.
But the permanent resident status is vital. You have to become a permanent resident if you want to become a citizen. It's sort of the stepping stone process. And as you mentioned, but just to reiterate, a permanent resident has access to the universal healthcare system, all of the social services, all of those amazing benefits that come with
everything.
Living in Canada, especially versus the US, where the healthcare system is dramatically different.
Yes.
Okay, great. And often, temporary residence can also be a stepping stone to permanent status. So first you become a student or a temporary worker, and then that will actually, gaining the educational experience or the work experience can make you eligible to then apply for permanent resident status. You can kind of think of it as a bit of a ladder in some cases. You sort of climb up the rungs on that ladder, though some people will be able to get right to the top from the beginning. So the next question that we know a ton of people will ask is, how do I know which program is right for me? What should I go through? There are more than 100 immigration pathways for coming to Canada. But Jenny, just because there are so many immigration pathways, does that mean that there is going to be one for everyone?
Not necessarily, unfortunately. Yeah, there are many options, but the candidates now need to be aware that the process is very selective. So they need to be more open and flexible to do their homework or embrace this project like a mission to accomplish that goal of becoming a resident. Maybe not only thinking about living in the big cities, but maybe going to smaller communities. That's an example. Maybe accepting that they are not going to get Canadian residency in 6 months or a year, like many of my clients say, I want to be in Canada in 6 months. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about this. And become a little more realistic. It is still feasible, as I said, but it's more of a homework now.
Yeah, it is. Homework is a great way of putting it. And I mean, in this live stream, we're going to cover a couple of the most popular and the most, the largest immigration pathways, but we're not going to be able to cover everything. An excellent thing to do if you are very serious about immigrating to Canada and you're not sure what your options are. First consult the Moving to Canada website. We got tons of resources there. But if you want personalized guidance, you can always book a one-on-one consultation with a regulated Canadian immigration consultant like Jenny. Jenny is wonderful. She'll take a look at your profile, all your skills and qualifications, and lay out a couple of the different immigration pathways that could be an option for you, along with the pros and cons. And I've actually put a link to Jenny's website where you can book a consultation right in the pinned comment for the live stream, so you can access that super easily right there. But let's move on to the immigration streams. So first, we're going to be covering express entry. And this is what we're going to be spending the most time on in today's live stream. It's big, it's complex, but if you can succeed through express entry, there are some major benefits. So, Jenny, first question for you. Is express entry an immigration program in and of itself?
Not really. Express entry is a system that was introduced, like I said, in 2015. And it covers 3 different programs that are like Canadian Experience Class, Fair Skilled Worker, or Fair Skilled Trades. Also added a second factor to the whole process, which is the score in express entry, the points, which has added, as I said, more complexity to the process. So
if you're in the U.S. and you followed the current administration's rhetoric on immigration, you may have heard the president talk about merit-based immigration. Express entry is very much a merit-based system. One could argue that all immigration systems are merit-based in one form or another, but express entry, it uses points, it uses a score, it's like super mathematical and complex, and it's definitely merit-based. And we will get into that in a moment, but Jenny, we talked before about temporary resident status versus permanent resident status. What type of status do you get if you are successful through express entry?
Oh, express entry is if you are successful, you secure Canadian residency, so permanent residency status. That's what we were talking about. So that's basically like being a green card holder in the US.
Yeah, so it's applying directly for that sort of the equivalent of green card status.
Yes.
So it's really valuable if you can get that.
Yeah, it's the most efficient way to secure Canadian residency. And if you are fortunate enough to have a good case in express entry, consider yourself very, very lucky.
And before we get into the qualifications, express entry, I know it's popular among families. Can you explain why express entry is such a popular family-based immigration program?
Yeah, because you can include your spouse, your common law partners, or your children as dependents in the application, so the family secures permanent residency at the same time.
Perfect. Yeah. So it's, I'm going to reiterate that point because it's really important for those of you who are watching. If you are married, if you have children, but you have a strong enough profile on your own, just yourself, to succeed through express entry, you can include your spouse, your children, your common law partner on that application. And if you're successful, all of you become permanent residents. Super efficient. But it's super efficient because it comes with a caveat. It is extraordinarily competitive and extremely complex. So, Jenny, you mentioned there are 3 programs that are encompassed by express entry. Let's give a quick overview of each of the 3 of them. The first one we're going to cover is the Federal Skilled Worker Program, and I'm going to field that one to you.
Yeah, I'm sure that most of the participants today are hoping to be eligible as a federal skilled worker candidate. I came as a federal skilled worker candidate to Canada myself many years ago from Peru. And basically, you need to demonstrate a strong skilled work experience in the last 10 years, out of which at least 1 year must be continuous and full-time. Full-time in immigration in Canada is only 30 hours a week of work. If it's not full-time, it can be 2 years of part-time continuous skilled work experience in the same occupation. They also need to prove some settlement funds or savings, and the amount depends on the composition of the family. There is an amount if you are a single applicant, and there's the amount changes, increases depending on how big your family is.
Right, and this, I believe this year for a single applicant, it's about 13,000 Canadian dollars. Goes up by about 3,000 for each additional family member.
Yeah, it's about 16,000 for a couple, 20,000 for a family of 3, and it goes on.
Yeah.
And there's the other important part of being eligible as a federal skilled worker is to have a minimum of 6 score grade. And there are 6 factors that need to be taken into consideration, and the first one is age. You start losing points once you turn 36. Then we have in the last 10 years, language ability that needs to be proven by a language test, arranged employment, not applicable really to most candidates. Then education, which needs to be validated by an educational credential assessment, and adaptability.
Right. And I'm just going to pull up quickly the Moving to Canada website here. So people can see those different points grids. This is, again, available at movingtocanada.com. There's actually a link in the pinned comment that will take you to the website, and you'll see all of those factors here. Again, you have to score 67 points out of 100 in order to meet the minimum eligibility for federal skilled worker. So thank you so much for that, Jenny. The next big program, you'll see it there in the acronym, is CEC. That's the Canadian Experience Class. I'll take a stab at explaining that one. The biggest thing for Canadian Experience Class is that you need 1 year of full-time continuous. It has to be no, it doesn't have to be continuous for
No.
Canadian Experience Class. Full-time skilled work experience gained within the 3 years prior to applying. Okay, so if you haven't worked in Canada before, or if you haven't worked in Canada before for at least 12 months cumulative, again, sorry, it doesn't have to be continuous, within the last 36 months, you're not going to be qualified for Canadian Experience Class. There are a few other important factors there. You have to prove some minimum abilities in terms of English or French. I'm not going to go into a huge detail about that for the purposes of this live stream. We're assuming that most of you are in the US and don't have Canadian work experience, so it's probably not the ideal pathway for you, but you will see later on when we talk about coming to Canada and maybe working first, gaining your work experience up front, that can then qualify you for Canadian Experience Class. Did I miss anything super important there, Jenny?
Yeah, the skilled work experience in Canada, for the purpose of being eligible as a Canadian Experience Class candidate, can be in any skilled job, be in your career, for example.
Okay.
A lot of people ask that question. And it can be a combination of different jobs and interrupted different employers. It doesn't matter.
And I know so we had a question come in. I'll just address it right now. It came in advance from Reedy, and we've got some related questions coming in right now. Is the IELTS English exam required even if a person has studied in the United States, or let's say even if a person grew up in the United States and has been speaking English their entire life? Do you need the IELTS exam?
The answer is, unfortunately, yes. If you want to be a candidate in Express Entry, you must take a language test.
Doesn't necessarily have to be IELTS. You can also do the CELPIP for English.
Oh, there is also CELPIP. That's right.
And there's also a couple of questions for French as well. And I saw a related question come in from Sarah asking, the IELTS exam isn't accepted. The IELTS exam isn't available across a lot of the United States right now because of COVID closures. And people have been asking us about the IELTS indicator, which is this sort of like online version of the IELTS. It is not accepted for Canadian immigration purposes. The IELTS indicator is not accepted. You'll have to wait until you can take either an IELTS or a CELPIP test at an area near you. Unfortunately, it's just the reality that COVID's slowed a lot of people's immigration processes down this year. The last immigration program in Express Entry is FST. That's the Federal Skilled Trades Program. We're not going to spend much time on this program today. It's for skilled tradespeople. You generally have to have some sort of connection to Canada, either through like a trade certificate from a province or a territory.
You need to get that red seal done, which is the Canadian certification, or you need to have arranged employment. Like you need to have a job offer validated by a labor market impact assessment.
Yeah, and we will actually be covering labor market impact assessments here in a couple minutes. But FST, again, it's not super common. We're not going to go into a ton of detail. More information is available on our website. So check that out if you are a skilled tradesperson and you have some certification in Canada or a Canadian job offer. So Jenny, we keep talking about skilled work experience being mandatory for Express Entry. What makes work experience skilled?
So a skilled work experience for the purposes of Express Entry or immigration in Canada falls under any job that falls under NOC or NOC code A, 0 or B. Right. And NOC code stands for National Occupational Classification, and there is a matrix in the government website where it clearly shows which ones are level 0, level A, and level B. So level C and D wouldn't be considered as a skilled job.
Yeah, Perfect. So it's NOC 0A or B. I'm just going to quickly pull up the NOC, the matrix, the search function on the government website so people can see. You can see there, I just Googled NOC search. Pretty easy to find. And then the Government of Canada has this Find Your NOC tool that will help you determine it. They've classified every single job. Your job might not fit perfectly, but you will be able to find something along the lines of your work experience. Great. So that's where you can look for more information about skilled employment. Now, Jenny, we've talked about the minimum requirements for express entry. Does meeting those minimum requirements and qualifying for one of the programs, does that mean you are going to be successful and you will get your PR?
Unfortunately not. That being eligible to be in express entry is just half of the game. You need to be aware that you will be assigned a score as soon as you join the pool of candidates. And based on that score, you are either competitive or not. And you need to understand how the score works so you can plan how to enhance your score so you can be invited to apply. Mm-hmm. That's when you move forward. When you're invited to.
Yeah, so I like to think of it sort of as the meeting the minimum eligibility requirements is like the key that unlocks the door to like the auction room. You're not through yet. You haven't won the prize yet. You still have to be selected. As you mentioned, there's a point system involved there. It is called the Comprehensive Ranking System. It's a point system out of 1,200 points. So if you're eligible, you create your profile, you submit it to the pool, and automatically, based on the info you provided, you're going to get a score out of 1,200. This score... and I know for FSW candidates especially, it's super confusing because we already said you have to get 67 points out of 100. And now we're like, you also have to get these points out of 1,200.
A lot of people just focus very much on the 67 points, which is really not the main deal of it. It's the first step.
Yeah. And so the 1,200 points is an entirely separate points grid. It's a completely new one, but you also have to be competitive there. So they're two different things. Mm-hmm. If people are talking about points related to express entry, it is kind of important to differentiate which set of points they're talking about. And now you can see why this is a confusing process. But your CRS score, it's based on a number of factors: your age, your language proficiency, your education, your work experience, and then there are some additional factors that can come into play. Do you have a provincial nomination? We're going to be talking more about those later. Job offers, siblings in Canada, French proficiency. Am I missing anything here? There?
Studies in Canada.
Yeah, studies in Canada, so that you can get some sort of bonus points there.
Yeah, there are bonus points, even for work experience in Canada with employer restricted work permits too.
Oh, yeah. And just so people are aware, the past couple of rounds of invitations, and we're going to talk about how that works, the score has been coming in the 470 range. So that's sort of where you want to shoot for if you're trying to figure out if you're going to be competitive enough. And maybe I'll pull up the CRS tool on the government website, but I'll have you explain, Jenny, we're going to talk about the process of applying through express entry. Mm-hmm. We like to break it down into two stages. You have the express entry profile stage, and then you have the ITA stage. So could you
invitation to apply? Yeah, the ITA invitation.
I talk in acronyms all the time. Gotta be careful about that here. Can you break down for our viewers what's involved in that first stage, the creation of the express entry profile?
Yeah. So first of all, you need to get the language test done, as we discussed, and then you also need to have your post-secondary educational credential. And then you also need to check if you have the settlement funds that are required for the particular program that you are going to be eligible under. So once you gather these ingredients, then you can create your profile, and that's when the score will be immediately granted.
Yeah.
And then you can, as they said, then you can be selected very soon. If it's not, then that's where the real homework starts.
Yeah. So once you're in the express entry pool, the way that the selection works is about once every 2 weeks or so. The government likes to be unpredictable, so sometimes that changes. But once every 2 weeks or so, the government will conduct what's called a draw. So they'll determine they want to invite maybe 4,000 people from the express entry pool. And the way that they invite people, it's very precise, it's very mathematical. They will say, we want to select 4,000 people, we're going to take the 4,000 people with the highest scores. So let's say that's everybody with a score above 471. That's how it works. Everyone above 471 gets an ITA. Everyone else stays in the pool. And then you wait another 2 weeks, see how many more people enter in the meantime, and they'll do another round of invitations. Mm-hmm. On occasion, they'll limit it by program. They might do one specifically for tradespeople or specifically for people with Canadian experience, that sort of thing. But for the vast majority, it's that's how it works. Once you receive that invitation, you then have to submit your PR application. So even then you're not done. Yeah. That's when like
and then so you need to be ready with your police checks, get a medical done, and then gather all the documentation to validate your work experience.
It's complicated.
Among other documents, of course, but those are the main.
Yeah, and it's an incredibly complex process, and they are rigorous, and they take no prisoners in terms of like how strict they are with requirements. They if you're missing one document, like they'll just
it's very demanding.
They don't come back and give you a second chance. Like you're just out.
And then you need to go back to the pool and start from scratch again, and then wait for another invitation.
Yeah, and it's actually one of the things where I say it really makes sense to work with a consultant, even if you just have someone review your express entry PR application, because it's so complex, and it's normal for a person who's not familiar with the process to just miss some simple thing. So if there's ever a time in the immigration process to work with a consultant like Jenny, that ITA stage is a really good time. And again, you can check out Jenny's website and the consultation booking through the link in the pinned comment there. Couple points on the ITA stage. You're given usually 60 days, so it's not a lot of time to complete the PR application. Presently, and if you're watching this later on YouTube, we're filming this in October of 2020. Presently, they're giving people extra time due to COVID. So people are being given 90 days, and then even more than that, sort of. But that's not usually how it works. So make sure you.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So right now it's 90 days, but it can change any time, back to 60, and
so just check the requirements for the time that you're applying. And I did promise people I would pull up just a few resources on the CRS score. So we've got a page here on the Moving to Canada website that breaks down the comprehensive ranking system. So you can get, I'm not going to go into detail here because there's as you can see, just so many grids of points. It gets really complicated. If you're looking for your score, you can get an estimate using this tool that the Government of Canada created. So you can see I just Googled CRS tool, and it's the cic.gc. .gc means it's a Government of Canada website, so it's a really good source. So you can go into this tool and plug in your personal information using this tool, and it will actually give you an estimate of your score. It can be a little tricky to use, so don't take it for granted that it's correct, but it's a good.
Yes. Yeah, I can share that many people come to, or we have a consultation, and then when they are very confident about the score that they estimated using the calculator, and many of them are wrong. So we need to review the scores together and then explain, okay, because depending on what data you enter, you can get the wrong answer.
Yeah. And I'm just going through the questions now to show people, like, it can be tough to answer some of these questions. If, like, IELTS is the language test, and now it's asking me all of these points-based scores. So if you haven't taken the language test, you actually don't know what your scores are going to be. So you're kind of guessing there. I'm going to navigate away from that and just show off on the Moving to Canada website our guide on improving your CRS score. So once you are in the pool, if you're looking for ways to improve your score, you can find our guide here. It's just under the Express Entry column, how to improve your CRS score. Some super handy tips there. I wish we could go into more detail about that, but we could do, I mean, Jenny, we could do a whole live stream on just the CRS score.
We could be here for a long, for many hours otherwise,
Yeah. A couple of other considerations for Express Entry, and I've seen a few questions come in about these things. Stephanie was asking about Quebec. We didn't actually cover that, but is Quebec included in Express Entry?
No. So it's a federal. You can, however, going through Express Entry, you secure Canadian residency. So you can live anywhere in Canada, including Quebec.
Yeah.
But you cannot land, Quebec cannot be your first entry point or your first point of landing.
Yeah, you have to demonstrate that you have the intention to reside somewhere other than Quebec, but once you have your PR status and you're in Canada,
you can live anywhere.
You can move to Quebec. Quebec, for people who aren't familiar with Canada, is, I don't know the best way to describe it. It's maybe like the Texas of Canada. Fiercely independent. And it has its own set of immigration programs. We aren't going to cover them today because they're just as detailed as all the federal ones, but much smaller. So we just don't have the time to go into those. We're trying to give you guys the most bang for your buck here, eh? So we're covering the big ones. The other thing that I wanted to cover that's important, medical and criminal background checks. People can be rejected for those reasons. Can you explain that?
Definitely. Yeah, so when you go through the immigration process, you are expected to demonstrate that you are not on criminality on medical grounds. So that's why the medical is mandatory. It's mandatory before you submit your application, upon invitation to apply. Mm-hmm. So you need to get a medical done with a physician authorized by the Canadian government, wherever you are. And you need to gather carefully your police checks from the countries where you have lived at least 6 continuous months since you turned 18 years old.
And if you're missing just one police certificate, they'll reject you. It's it
can be very tough.
They're very strict. So I'm just going to show off one resource here before we move on to our next topic, which is the Express Entry Roadmap. On the Moving to Canada website. So this is an email education service that we've designed at Moving to Canada. You give us your email and we will send you, over the course of a week, 1 lesson per day. Each lesson will cover a topic that's foundational to understanding Express Entry. So if you're thinking, this could be the immigration pathway for me, subscribe to this roadmap. Over the course of the next week, you'll get these emails and you'll be able to develop a more nuanced understanding of this and see if it is something that could be for you. Again, you can access the Moving to Canada website right in the pinned comment on the live stream. Now, we had a question come in. I've got so many things open, so let me see if I can find it. Ellie Louise was asking about PNPs, and that is our next topic, but Ellie asked a great question to lead us in there, which is, can I get into a PNP after I've submitted my Express Entry profile?
Yes. So you can approach the provincial governments or the provincial nominee programs to enhance your score in Express Entry by 600 points, or sometimes you can also go straight to the provincial government without being in Express Entry.
Right.
And in some specific cases, very, very specific, you might not even need to take an English test to approach the provincial nominee program. So we have discussed that with some clients in the US that cannot get the English test done in time.
I actually didn't know that there were some. I guess that makes sense that there are some that don't require the English test.
There are some specifics behind it, like it depends on the program. It depends also on the type of job offer secured in Canada, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. So, yeah.
But just to break that down, because this is important to understand one more time for our viewers, as Jenny just explained, there are two big categories of PNPs. The ones that are part of Express Entry and the ones that are not part of Express Entry. The ones that are part of Express Entry, they actually require, so Ellie, they require that you have an Express Entry profile in order to be considered. And if you get a nomination through those programs, you get an additional 600 points added to your CRS score. I mentioned the cutoff for lately has been in the 470s. 600 points is going to get you an invitation. It is enough.
Yes.
The other ones are not a part of Express Entry. You apply directly, as you said, Jenny, to the province. You don't need an Express Entry profile. And
No, so yeah, and when the provincial government nominates the candidate, they issue a nomination certificate, and then with that recommendation, the candidate goes to the federal government recommended by the province and completes the second stage of the process, typically on paper.
Right. And it
Not
takes a
Express
lot
Entry.
longer, the non-Express Entry ones.
It takes longer indeed.
That's why
Yes.
Express Entry is called Express Entry, because it takes about 6.
It's express once you have
Yeah,
a good case,
exactly.
right?
If you can get in, it
Yeah.
can be quite fast, about 6 months or so, but that's only the processing stage. There's all the other steps to get into it. So we've gotten ahead of ourselves a little bit. Let's jump back and explain broadly what is a provincial nominee program. So Canada, for those people in the U.S. who aren't on top of their Canadian geography, we have 10 provinces in Canada and 3 territories. The territories are in the north. And each of these provinces and territories, with the exception of Quebec, again, Quebec just out there, being the Texas of Canada, all on its own, each of the other provinces has a provincial nominee program or a territorial nominee program in the case of the 3 northern territories. So PNPs are essentially, I describe them as mini immigration programs that enable the provinces to invite permanent residents based on their provincial needs. So let's say, a province has a shortage in tech workers. They might launch a PNP that targets tech workers, and there are some examples of that we'll get to in just a moment. Or if a province has difficulty retaining immigrants because so many of the immigrants who come to Canada, they go to Toronto or they go to Vancouver or they go to Montreal. So the smaller provinces, if they have a tough time retaining immigrants, they might do a provincial nominee program that requires you to have family in the province or previous education in the province, so you already have a connection. Those sorts of things. It really allows them to base immigration on their economic and demographic needs. So Jenny, question for you. We talked about how Express Entry is a permanent resident program. What about PNPs? What type of status do you get if you go through a provincial nominee program?
So the PNPs are permanent residency alternatives. So the PNP is a permanent residency alternative. How you use the PNP is, as we discussed, either to enhance your score in Express Entry, or it's the first step to then be recommended for permanent residency to the federal government. The federal government is the one that is going to issue the confirmation of permanent residency in the end. But when you approach the provincial nominee programs, you are going all the way for Canadian residents.
Right. Again, so it's that direct to permanent resident status. So if you can get through a PNP, it's again sort of more bang for your buck. Yes. You're getting that valuable PR status right off the bat. So if you can qualify, it's great. The challenging thing is knowing if you qualify. Why is that? It's because there are more than 80 streams. 80 streams. That's so many PNP streams. Yeah. Because it's not like each province has one program. Each province has some of them have 12 different PNP streams. I might be exaggerating a little bit, but they have a lot. So I'm going to pull up a little tool that we've put together here at Moving to Canada. So it's our PNP Live Tracker. And so this, not only do we track all of the latest PNP news and updates, which you'll see here, but we also have this cool little tool. You see it says find the right PNP stream for you. Click that, and it takes you down to our live tracker tool. With this tool, you will see all of those PNP streams that we mentioned. It seems confusing, but you can actually use this tool to search different PNPs based on occupation. So maybe I want to search for PNPs for teachers. I can actually look up secondary school teachers. It'll give me the NOC code, and I can see, okay, well, these streams, it could be an option for teachers. We were talking about, is it part of Express Entry or not? You can see, does it require an Express Entry profile? Yes. It's going to filter even more. Does it require a job offer? Does it require Canadian work experience, Canadian study? Do I need to be living in Canada? Which province is it in? So you can use, there's so many different filters here, but this is a really powerful tool if you want to get a general sense of what PNP options might be available to you. The one caveat that I'll put out there is it's limited, the power of this tool. It's going to give you like a general overview of what might be a possibility, but it won't confirm that you're eligible. The eligibility requirements are a bit more complex than that. But in there, you did have a chance to see a few of the common types of PNPs. So Jenny, maybe we can go back and forth and just rattle through a couple of these common PNP streams. So job offer-based PNP streams, can you tell our viewers a little bit about those?
Yeah, most PNPs require a job offer. Most of them, especially if you wish to move forward in an efficient way, you need to be proactive about it and try to secure a job offer in the province where you plan to settle. And that's also something else that should be taken into consideration, because a lot of people with different backgrounds, just if they for example, they see that the occupation could be in demand in Nova Scotia, but they have no idea how is living in Nova Scotia, and depending on their family composition, on children, everything, it might not be the best fit. And when you go through a provincial nominee program, you are expected to settle in that province, at least for a while. Mm-hmm. And so there are also some programs that I'm sure you're going to not require a job offer, but then they are more unpredictable, right? So more uncertain. And that's where the frustration comes.
Yeah, but it is, like you said, it's worthwhile to consider where you're willing to live, because Nova Scotia, that's where I'm based, and it's a pretty small town life here. I'm in Halifax, and it's a small city. There's not that much going on. I mean, it's a pandemic, so there's not much going on anywhere, but in a normal year, there wouldn't be much going on here compared to Toronto. So the next example here of a common type of PNP is an in-demand occupation PNP. This is, as I mentioned as an example, sometimes provinces will notice that they have a labor shortage in a certain sector. They might put out a list of, it could be 5, it could be 30 different occupations that are in demand, and you need to have experience in one of those in-demand occupations in order to apply. They don't necessarily require that you have a job offer, but you have to demonstrate, like, hey, I can fill this gap in your labor force if you let me immigrate. So those are the in-demand occupations. We'll give a couple examples of those in a sec, but Jenny, can you talk about PNPs that require previous education or work experience?
Yeah, in the prairies, typically, that's where there are expectations of some ties, because they want to make sure they're inviting the right candidate that is actually going to establish in the province. And how do they select them? By granting points to those that have previous experience, as you said, or family or friends in such province, because they are not as desirable as Ontario or British Columbia or Quebec.
So they have to figure out a way to sort of have people drop an anchor before they let them immigrate permanently. Study is another important factor there too. If you've studied at a university in a province, you have a much stronger likelihood of staying there because you've formed all your college bonds in Winnipeg. I mean, you could. Winnipeg is a fun college town. Maybe. I just made that up. I don't know if that's true. Okay, and the last one that I put here is business or entrepreneurial PNP streams. This is there's a few different versions of these in different provinces. It's for people generally you have to have a high personal net worth. I think the lowest one is a net worth of at least 200,000 Canadian dollars. I think that's PEI, if I have it memorized correctly. And you usually have to demonstrate that you have some experience managing or owning a business. And then you have to propose a business that you're going to start in this province. So it's super complex. But if you are a business owner and you would want to start a business in Canada, this can actually be a pathway for those entrepreneurial types out there.
I think it's important to add that also entrepreneurs compete to be invited. In most provinces, there is also, you mentioned the eligibility requirements, but once they decide to move forward, if they meet the requirements, if they have the net worth, blah, 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 then they will also be granted a score. And based on that score, they will be invited or not.
And that's, I mean, I think that's interesting for people to know. We talked about the scoring system in Express Entry, this like 1,200 points. It seems like that's become so popular that all of the provinces are borrowing it. So now you see all of these new different types of point systems popping up for PNPs. And there'll be so many different provinces have different.
It's not easy to keep up with them.
No. I mean, it's my full-time job. And it's complicated. Like, I don't even have them all memorized at this point because it's impossible to memorize the 80 different criteria. Right. So let's give a little bit of an example of PNPs that might be relevant to people who are living in the U.S. There are some popular PNPs for tech workers. And this could apply for U.S. citizens, but they're also really popular for H-1B holders in the U.S. who may have come under that specialized work visa to work in tech. We know that there's a lot of tech workers who come with H-1Bs. Canada has two very popular PNP streams that target tech workers specifically. Ontario recently started a tech pilot through their PNP stream. And Jenny, you're based in BC. BC also has a tech pilot PNP?
Yes. British Columbia has a tech pilot initiative since maybe 2017. And it was supposed to expire last June, but they extended it for another year in the middle of the pandemic. This is a clear proof that we are trying to attract top talent, and a lot of Americans are using the tech pilot in British Columbia to move to Canada.
Right. And there's 29 occupations on that list.
There are 29. So in order to work with the BCPNP, you need to have a job offer in the province that is in one of the 29 eligible occupations. Right. And once you secure the job offer, you can become a candidate. The invitations to apply take place every week. That's every week. And the scores required are so friendly.
Yeah.
And BCPNP office is also giving red carpet to these candidates. Get red carpet service. So they give priority to processing. So we have seen some cases being approved in a matter of days.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yes, days to secure a nomination.
That's wild.
And with that nomination comes also a work support letter. So candidates can apply as well for a work permit to come to Canada and start working for the employer while they wait for their permanent residency to come through.
And we've got some questions coming in about job offers and work permits, and you're talking about work permits right now. We're going to move on to our section on work permits. Just before we do, if you do want more information about PNPs, I suggest checking out the live tracker, that tool on the Moving to Canada website. But as you just witnessed, Jenny is pretty much as close to an expert as you're going to find on the BC PNP. So if you want guidance on that program specifically, book a consultation. Link is in the pinned comment. But let's hop over to our section on work permits. And I saw a question come in from Eric Miller. Is there any issue with job offers from U.S. companies with offices in Canada? So Eric, in a moment, we're going to get to a work permit category that might be appropriate for you. So let's talk a bit about the type of status that you get with a work permit. Again, I'm going to jump back to temporary versus permanent status. Jenny, what type of status does a person get with a work permit?
Yeah, they become workers, so they can gain valuable work experience in Canada to transition to residency.
Right.
So yeah, that's very typical for many candidates to use first as a path for Canadian residency.
And the work permit itself is a type of temporary resident status, is it?
Yeah, it's a status, so they receive a document like a work permit. Yeah.
And the thing with temporary resident status is that it always has like an end date. So you're going to get this work permit and it will say this ends on this date. At that point, you have to, you either have to leave Canada or change your status. But as you mentioned, applying for a work permit first can be a really useful tool for eventually becoming a permanent resident. If you folks remember, when we were talking about express entry, I mentioned the Canadian experience class that requires you to have 1 year of skilled work experience in Canada. Having a work permit can help you get that experience, and Canadian work experience is super highly valued in the express entry point system. So if you can get here first as a worker, get that year of work experience, then you might be more competitive in express entry. So it's a bit of a longer process, but it can be a great option. And we just mentioned in the PNP section that there are some PNPs that require prior work experience too, so can also make you eligible for those. Now, there are many types of work permits in Canada. Again, we can't go over everything in this video. We're going to touch on a couple of the more common ones. Notably, all three of the work permits we're going to talk about today require you to have Canadian employment arranged in advance. There are some that do not, but they're a bit harder to come by. We're not going to cover those ones in today's live stream. We're going to start off with labor market impact assessment based work permits. It's a big word, a big series of words. Jenny, can you explain to our viewers what is a labor market impact assessment and what does it have to do with work permits?
Yeah, a labor market impact assessment, or LMIA, is an application made by the Canadian employer to demonstrate that there is no negative impact on bringing a foreign worker to Canada. So that application, and because a lot of people get confused and say, I want to apply for an LMIA, and the answer is, well, the one that needs to apply for it is your employer in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, please go on.
No, I was going to say that once that application is approved, then the foreign worker uses that approval or positive LMIA to apply for a work permit.
Right. And the LMIA, as you said, it's an application that has to be submitted by the employer. And the purpose of the LMIA is to prove that there's no Canadian available to fill the position. They have to show that they need to bring in a foreign worker because there aren't Canadians available. And is that an easy process or a cheap process for employers, Jenny?
Unfortunately, it's not easy. Most of the time requires very extensive recruitment campaign to demonstrate that there are no Canadians willing to do that job or able to do that job.
So it's employers are incentivized to hire Canadians if they can. So generally the LMIAs, they'll only be offered by employers who really need this sort of specialized talent. Maybe employers who have more experience doing it. Once you know how it works, it can be a bit easier. But it also costs, in most cases, money to have the employer process that. So they usually have to pay, is it $1,000 to process the LMIA?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There are some exemptions to that payment when the LMIA is just for permanent residency support, but in general, it's a process that can be time-consuming.
But if you can get through it, it can be a really fruitful way to get your work permit and start getting that work experience. Now, There are certain types of work permits that do not require an LMIA. They are known as LMIA exempt work permits. And we're going to talk about two of those right now. The first one, this is for you, Eric, your question about job offers from U.S. employers who have offices in Canada. This is the Intra-Company Transfer work permit. The intra-company transfer work permit, it actually doesn't require that you have an LMIA. The conditions for it is that you have to be coming from an employer who has an office outside of Canada, but they also have an office inside Canada, and they are transferring you to the office inside Canada to perform whatever specific duties there are. So they can go through that process and transfer you across their offices without requiring the labor market impact assessment. Did I get that right?
There must be a qualifying relationship between the American company and the company in Canada. And the candidate must have worked at least for 1 year in the last 3 years for the foreign company.
Great. But if you... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and there are 3 types of candidates that can use executives, senior managers, or specialized knowledge work.
Right. Okay. That's, I think, really important to know. So just, if you're working for a Best Buy in the United States as a retail associate, they might not be able to transfer you to the one in Toronto, for example. You have to show that specialized talent or the higher level employment. And again, if you can get that Canadian work experience in Canada, then you can use that to apply for permanent status. So Jenny, I'm going to field this section to you, but we're going to talk about the USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, which has replaced the North American Free Trade Agreement just this year. It's a bit confusing. In the US, they branded it the USMCA. In Canada, they branded it the CUSMA. CUSMA.
CUSMA. I call it CUSMA.
CUSMA.
Like Cusco in Peru, CUSMA. Yeah, that's CUSMA. Yeah.
So under the USMCA, there's a whole chapter on immigration. I read side by side the NAFTA chapter and the USMCA chapter, and essentially nothing changed as far as immigration is concerned. Lots of things changed in other places, but it's pretty much stayed the same. Jenny, can you explain how the USMCA or the CUSMA can help people get work permits in Canada?
Yeah, so there is a list of designated occupations. I call it the lucky list, where so if a candidate has educational credentials or qualifications and work experience in one of those occupations, and they secure a job offer in Canada, the employer doesn't need to apply for an LMIA. This is another LMIA exempt work permit. It's a very efficient way to apply for a work permit for Americans. In standard times, it was very easy just to show up the port of entry at the border or at the airport and apply for it and get a printed work permit in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, and I've pulled up, just for our viewers, this list of eligible occupations for USMCA professionals. So you can scroll through this again. You can find it on the Moving to Canada website and see if your profession might be on the list there. Do you need a job offer in order to get your work permit through this stream?
That's right. Okay. Yes, you need.
Yeah, so you can't just show up at the border and say, "I'm an accountant. I want my USMCA work permit." You have to show.
No, you need a job.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. I know. So I'm actually going to move back to our presentation here, and we'll answer a couple of questions that came in about work permits. We had a question come in advance from a listener, John, who said, "I'm a U.S. citizen who has an approved IEC working holiday visa. I've yet to activate it due to the pandemic, but I'm interested in pursuing permanent residency in Canada. Does having the working holiday visa assist me in this process?" I'll speak a little bit to that, and you can correct me if I get any of this wrong.
Yeah,
Jenny.
sure.
The working holiday program, it's for youth generally under the age of 30 or under the age of 35. from certain participating countries around the world. You can get a work permit that allows you to come to Canada and travel and work for a year or 2 years, depending, again, on the country you're coming from. If you have an IEC working holiday work permit, you can come and you can try to gain that 12 months of full-time skilled work experience. You have to be smart about it. You have to try to get that 12 months of full-time skilled work experience, which can then qualify you for permanent residency programs. But you have to be smart. Unfortunately, John is a bit of an outlier because not many U.S. citizens or U.S. residents are necessarily eligible for International Experience Canada. That's because the U.S. isn't one of the participating countries. There are some ways around that. We're not going to go into that in detail in this live stream, but there's tons of information about the Working Holiday Program on our website. You can check that out, but it's mostly for countries. There's about 30, I think it's 35 countries that participate. And there are a ton of other types of work permits out there that we haven't covered. Check out the website if you've got more questions about that. I've seen a ton of questions come in about retirement from Ned. We had some questions from some people in advance. We are going to talk briefly about retirement at the end of the live stream. It's our last topic that we're covering. So just sit tight, be patient with us, and we'll get there. But we're going to talk now about immigration for students. So, Jenny, again, I'm going to ask you the question about temporary versus permanent status. If you come to Canada as an international student, are you a temporary resident or are you a permanent resident?
You're a temporary resident. So you are a student in Canada.
Yeah. And so just like your work permit, you're going to get a study permit, and it's going to have a date that says, after this date, your study permit ends.
That's right. And
you either have to leave or you have to change it. Canada gets more than 500,000 international students per year. It's a huge number.
Yes.
There's some great schools here. You can do your research, but there are some good study options, and it's very popular. This year might be different because the border's closed, but hopefully that will change soon.
Yes.
So the study permit, are you able to work while you're studying, Jenny?
Yeah, you are able to work up to 20 hours a week while you are attending a school, and full time during the school breaks. Mm-hmm. And if you go to the right school, you can apply for a open postgraduate work permit, and then you can you generate yourself a work permit upon graduation from the right school in Canada.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest advantage to studying in Canada is you become eligible for the post-graduation work permit. And generally it's issued for up to 3 years. It's open.
That's right.
It's an open work permit. So before, all of the work permits we were talking about were tied to specific employers or specific jobs. Jenny, can you explain the difference between those and an open work permit?
Yeah, so when a postgraduate work permit is an open work permit, and it can be a 3-year open work permit if you complete studies of 2 years, or a master's degree or a PhD in Canada.
Right.
So at the right school, so it needs to be a public school or a private school that acts as a public. So there are some specific.
There's also, so you can look up your school on the government website. Just make sure if you're going to apply to study in Canada and you want to do it permanently, like make sure you look up the school.
Yes. So if you study a 1-year program, the postgraduate work permit will be only for 1 year, except if it's a master or a PhD, right, of course. And with an open work permit, you can do anything. You can work for anybody. You can work in any skilled job. You can work unlimited hours. You can even run your own business. You can be self-employed. Yeah. So that's the beauty of having an open work permit.
Yeah. So if you are, especially if you're younger and you haven't done or completed your post-secondary education, you've been thinking about doing a master's in the States, but you'd consider doing one in Canada. If you want to immigrate permanently, why not do your master's degree here, get that study permit, get your work permit afterwards, and then get that really valuable, we're going to keep talking about it, the really valuable Canadian work experience, skilled Canadian work experience, super valuable.
Yes, you get And also in the express entry system, if you want to become a good candidate, you get more points for having more education, more points for having education in Canada. So there are bonus points for that.
Yeah.
And then you get more points for the work experience in Canada with a postgraduate work permit.
Yeah. So it's you're just stacking points stacked on points, man. It's how to succeed. Great. So that about covers it for studying. For more information, I am going to refer you all to a little resource. I sang that part. See, it's fun. We're having fun here, guys. Immigration can be fun. The International Student Roadmap on the Moving to Canada website. Like the Express Entry Roadmap, this is an email education service. You give us your email. We're going to send you one lesson per day for a week, total of 7 lessons. Each lesson is going to cover a different aspect of studying in Canada. It'll take you through the whole study permit application process, explain post-grad work permits and permanent residency applications. It's totally free. All you have to do is go here, give us your email, and you can find it right under the study section here, the International Student Roadmap on the Moving to Canada website. You can also sign up just by creating your free account using the link in the pinned comment. So let's go on to our last topic, family sponsorship. So family sponsorship, we haven't talked a lot about this because honestly, finding out if you're eligible for family sponsorship, I think it's the easiest one to assess your eligibility for. So we're just going to cover it at its base. That doesn't mean is it an easy application itself, Jenny?
No, it's not an easy application. If you spouse, great, that's great news. But putting together the application can be it's also a lot of work.
Yeah. And it's detailed, like the express entry applications we were talking about. They're pretty strict with these. Like you gotta make sure that you include everything. So Jenny, if you go through family sponsorship, if you are eligible, permanent status or temporary status, what do you get at the end of it?
Permanent, you get Canadian residency status. You get permanent residency. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna add that you can sponsor your spouse, but you can also sponsor your children younger than 22. And some restrictions apply for 22 or older than.
Yeah. But as you mentioned, the general relationships are spouse. Common law partners are also included in that.
That's right. Common law partners, that in Canada is when you have lived together 12 continuous months anywhere in the world.
12 continuous months. And dependent children, as you mentioned, are also eligible for sponsorship. There's a few other types of relationships. They're less common. We're not going to go into them today, but there is also a program that allows Canadian citizens and permanent residents to sponsor their parents and grandparents. It's called the Parent and Grandparent Program, aptly named. However, I'm going to put a big star next to this because it's super... I don't know how to phrase this nicely. It's not the most well-organized program in the world, and it's very challenging to be successful through it. For example, this year they're giving 10,000 spots, or they're accepting 10,000 applications through the Parent and Grandparent Program. The way that it works, it's totally random. So you just submit your interest, and if you're selected, it's like your name out of a hat, then you can sponsor your parent or grandparent. If you're not selected, which the vast majority of people won't be, then you're out of luck. But they tend to change that program a lot. Yes. They did a first come, first serve last year, and it filled up in like 8 minutes. And then they switched to this random. Oh, yes. I don't know.
Yeah, this year there is a time. There is a number of days where you can do it. So it's gonna end very soon in the next few days.
Yeah, but people critique it because it's so random. Like they don't think that sponsoring your parent or your grandparent should be this random thing. There should be some sort of,
I know, and what happens is that before they are working on trying to improve this program, but before it was on a first come first serve basis, and it was on paper. I went through that to sponsor my parents, and it took over 6 years, almost 7 years.
Man.
Yeah, exactly. So before this messy system, Indian nationals could easily wait 10 plus years, or yes, it was pretty sad. And now they are trying to improve it, but still they are trying to figure out a way to do that. So by selecting, so however, once parents or grandparents are invited, processing times can be around 18
Yeah, so that's
months.
not that long.
That's not bad.
So, I mean, I think that actually helps people understand, why we've been talking all about these complex systems, the points for everything, all of these different criteria. Like, that's why. It's because all of these programs used to be first come, first serve, and it would result in these year-long backlogs. It would be 6, 7 years, at more than 10 years, depending on where you were coming from. So it's just, I mean, it's not really fair at that point.
I know.
One thing that I did want to note regarding regarding family sponsorship is about siblings. So my understanding of the U.S. immigration system, and I will say that I'm not an expert in U.S. immigration, is that siblings are able to sponsor one another for permanent resident status for a green card in the U.S. That is not the case in Canada. You cannot sponsor your sibling for permanent resident status, unfortunately. Sometimes you get some extra points in express entry for PNPs, but it's not a golden ticket by any means. And I think that's important to understand. So, Jenny, a question we've been getting a lot of, and I know we had some questions come in advance. People asking about, let me see, I'm going to scroll back here and see if I can find one of our questions right at the beginning. So we had Bree ask at the beginning, can you explain citizenship by descent? And I know we've had some other people writing in saying, my grandmother was born in Canada, but I've lived in the U.S. Am I a citizen? My uncle, like, what should people do if they think they might be a citizen?
Oh, it is complex. There's no answer that applies to everybody. It's on a case-by-case basis, and a lot of Americans are exploring now their Canadian ancestry, like to see if they can apply for a Canadian citizenship certificate. But there are factors that impact their eligibility, because the Citizenship Act, as I mentioned before, has changed over time. So depending on when the parent was born, and then some governments embraced some changes, but they didn't implement it. So even that can affect the eligibility for it. But there is a tool that I think you have, or the Canadian government has. So that's what I would recommend them to go and check.
Yeah, and I will.
That's the most.
I will show that off to people. I've just opened it, so you can just Google, "Am I a Canadian citizen?" And the first thing that's going to pop up is this tool by the Canadian government. See if you may be a citizen, and you can kind of go through the different pathways. They have this thing called the "Am I a Citizen" tool, where you answer some different questions, and it will tell you if they think you might be or might not be. If it comes down to a point where you think you might actually be a Canadian citizen, the best thing to do is...
Yes, go for it.
Yeah, you just apply for your proof of citizenship. Worst case.
Yes, because it's... can you imagine? I just said... I tell my American clients that are doing it now, is we're going to celebrate together, because you're not going to be a Canadian resident, you're going to be a Canadian citizen.
Yeah.
So they are just all the way for citizenship, right like that.
Yeah, and I'm just going through the tool so people can see some of the questions, but you see it gets pretty detailed right off the bat. It's that's all that I'm going to show off of that for our viewers. But yeah, if you are wondering, that's a good place to start. The other question that we've seen come through a lot, and we've been getting a ton of questions to our Moving to Canada social and our email accounts and everything for the past few months about retirement. And I've seen a ton of questions come in. Kenneth was asking about are U.S. retirees welcome to come? We just had a question recently from Ned asking about retirees. So if you want to retire from the US to Canada, it's very challenging to get that permanent resident status that we were talking about. What's more common is actually living in Canada part-time and on visitor status. But if you want more details, I'm going to pull up a guide that we put together. We had so many of these questions coming in that we wrote this guide on how to retire from the United States to Canada. So you'll be able to get details on visiting versus permanent immigration. We've got details on accessing healthcare, which I know is a big concern for a lot of people at retirement age, especially because Canada's healthcare system is, great if you can access it. Taxes, all of this different information. So check out that guide. Again, it's on the Moving to Canada website. Head to our Moving From section, and you're going to select the United States, and it'll tell you everything. Well, it'll give you some general info. It might not tell you everything you need to know about retiring, but some general info there. Well, it's 4:22. We got a couple 4:22 in Nova Scotia. What time is it in Vancouver?
12:22.
Canada's really big. Yes. Let's do maybe one or two questions that we had come in. Some impromptu questions. Gonna put you on your toes here, Jenny, and then we'll wrap up at about 4:30. So Jennifer asked us, can you bring your spouse and your child with you if you come to Canada as an international student?
Yes, if you are in a study program, your spouse can apply for an open work permit, and your child as well.
Yeah.
Apply for a postgraduate work permit, your work permit for the same validity, but after met by the student that just graduated.
Right. So it's definitely an option, but it's not guaranteed. Let's put it that way.
Oh, it is. If it's a family from the U.S., it's definitely very viable. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's one thing. Just to be totally honest about how Canada processes student applications, the denial rate varies dramatically from country to country, and the U.S. has a very high approval rate for study permit applicants. So you'll likely be approved. We can't guarantee anything, but
Do you have any idea how many applicants a year are for study permits?
Apply for study permits? I don't know. I do know. I think last year there were more than 600,000 active study permits in Canada.
So they're probably it's like, and considering the refusal rate, it must be. Way over 1 million.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's over 1 million. I can't guarantee that, but we'll I'll have to look into it. Let's do a couple other questions. So we've got some people. Oh, this is an interesting question that I've seen come through. U.S. citizens or U.S. residents who are working remotely for companies in the U.S., but they want to relocate to Canada. Do you have any advice for people in that situation? That came from Elena.
I've been asked this question. The challenge is that they want to continue doing exactly what they are doing, but from a house in Canada. And unfortunately, as we just explained, the system is complex. Be able to do that, temporarily, yes. I mean, there are now many Americans here that have extended their visit, and they are enjoying the lifestyle while still working remotely. Mm-hmm. But it's until they embrace a path for permanent residency.
Right. And you technically can't undertake activities that aren't approved based on your status. So if you're visiting Canada, you can't undertake work.
There cannot be conflict. They cannot in Canada, or it cannot affect their job. Their work cannot affect the Canadian labor market, for sure.
Exactly. My understanding is that remote work doesn't, if you're remote working for a company that's outside Canada, you're not receiving wages in Canada, that sort of thing, that doesn't technically qualify as, work for immigration purposes, but you are going to have to make sure you stay in good status and you abide by the conditions of whatever that status is. Great. Okay. Maybe one more question here. Oh, this is a good question. It came from Emily, and I can field this. It's Emily asks, how do the COVID travel restrictions impact immigration from the United States? Is there any path to immigration that we can take right now? So, Emily, I'm the one who keeps up to date the COVID news feed on the Moving to Canada website, so I track all of the changes to immigration and travel restrictions related to COVID in Canada. There have been a lot of them, so many. As far as travel restrictions are concerned, the bulk of foreign nationals are not able to enter Canada at this time. Okay, so a lot of people can't enter. There are exemptions to that. People who have family, recently they relaxed some restrictions for some international students, that sort of thing. But the travel restrictions aside, immigration programs, most of them are still pushing forward and still active. So Express Entry, for example, you can still apply through Express Entry. Provincial nominee programs, they're still active. These things are still moving. It's just the actual relocation to Canada, the traveling to Canada, is not necessarily an option right now. But there are still many immigration programs that are operating. I would say the bulk of them are still in operation. IEC, I know, was paused.
The processing times are still processing applications.
Yeah. Great. So that kind of covers that for you, Emily. And I'm going to show off a couple of links here, so I might as well show our COVID news feed. So you can find this linked at the top of every page on the Moving to Canada website because it's important to understand at this moment in time. But you can check the COVID news feed on the Moving to Canada website for the latest updates on who can enter Canada, what special immigration measures are in effect, etc. And I have just gotten a note from my editor. He's writing to me, so this is happening live, guys. This is live breaking news. I'm gonna trust that he's right here. So he's saying that they've just announced a change to the point system for Express Entry to help French speakers. So they're going, currently we had talked about additional points for French speakers coming through Express Entry. It's 15 additional points if you speak just French and 30 if you speak both French and English. And you have to take a language test for that. They're bumping it up. So if you speak just French, you get 25 bonus points just for speaking French. And if you're bilingual, you get 50 points. That's
so. And Dane, there are two sections where the second language has an impact. So those are bonus points, but in the main composition of the score, they also get more points. That's very neat.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, that came from Hugo, and that was a really good.
This to show how dynamic this industry is. Things keep changing all the time.
Yeah, well, it's one of these cool things that immigration can do. It recognizes what the needs of a specific region are, and it's flexible and can adapt to that really quickly. But I think that was a really good point you made. There's two types of language points you get through Express Entry. One for it's specifically like language points, and one is like bonus points. And this is under the bonus points section. It's called additional points in the system. Hugo says, "You're welcome, Jenny." So. Look at this, guys. We're bringing you the news as it happens. It is 4:30 now, so we are going to wrap up. I've got a couple of final things to say. You guys have seen through over the course of this live stream just how much knowledge on immigration Jenny has to offer. I'm pulling up her page here on our website because Perez McKenzie and Jenny are one of our recommended consultants. You can check out this page on the website right under the immigration section. Book an immigration consultant, book a consultation. You'll be able to find Jenny's page here. So if you want to get like a detailed personal plan, book a consultation with Jenny. Yeah. What sort of stuff are you able to cover in a consultation, Jenny?
Well, the consultations is the first step that we that approaches, because during the consultation we get to understand their case in detail before providing with recommendations. We assess the eligibility of the client, we review the scores together as applicable, and when we work together on an action plan that can be feasible for the client. So we go through all this and I answer all the questions that they have.
Great. And I pulled up the list of services that you provide in addition to just the consultation. So, express entry, PNPs, basically everything that we covered today. So if you are interested, you can read this website, or the easiest thing to do, click that link in the pinned comment, head over to Jenny's website, and you can book a consultation there. And I do have to take a sec to plug, of course, the Moving to Canada, some of our goodies too. You can create a free Moving to Canada account. That link is also in the pinned comment. It takes just a second, totally free. I've pulled up that registration page here, and that gives you access to a ton of our freebies as well. Those immigration roadmaps that I mentioned, the email roadmaps for express entry and international studies, as well as our getting started guide, as well as, cover letter and CV templates for applying for jobs. All of those sorts of fun things, totally free, just takes a second. So I highly recommend clicking that link in the pinned comment. But that's about all that we have to cover today. So thank you, Jenny. This has been lovely. First live stream we've gotten to do together. Did you have fun?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Yeah, it was fun. Now I'm hungry.
I'm very hungry. I also had to pee for the last 25 minutes. If I'm being totally honest.
It's good. I went the day before, yeah.
It's true. You guys missed it, but there is.
Thank you, Dana.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Hugo. I know you are there.
Yeah, and the other big thank you has to go to all of you guys who tuned in. If you stuck it out for the full 90 minutes, I really appreciate that. But if you missed any of this, if you want to review some of the things that we talked about, if you're just tuning in now, we'll be posting this to YouTube probably tomorrow. We'll add little timestamps so you can skip ahead to the various sections that apply to you. So if you want to review any of this, again, check the Moving to Canada YouTube channel. It's Moving to Canada, the number 2, Moving to Canada on YouTube. You'll be able to find us up there. Thank you guys so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we will see you next time we go live, which might be tomorrow if there's an express entry draw. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Dane. Bye.